Set that. Strange. Alright, just let me get this thing out there. Why do I post the Streamlabs link instead of the YouTube link? I gotta do something to change that. I gotta mess around with my settings in YouTube. See how I could do something about that. Alright, tweet that out. Alright. I'll post this in Discord. Make sure I got the chat on too. Okay, looks like everything's good. And I'll post this in Discord real quick too. What's up? Make sure everybody can hear me. I don't have a super obnoxious username. Hey everyone, what's up? Mean Dingus still has his, so you can change it. They can hear me. All right. Start in a second. All right, you guys can hear me fine. All right. So yeah, I've been meaning to do this for a while since I did one. I did do one of these a long time ago, but since then my opinions have changed a lot, and I've just thought about how I approach these things overall. First things first, I'll just go over how I actually do this. Anyone up here, obviously they're going to be the best characters in the game. I don't think they lose to more than 3 characters if they lose to any at all. Through here, at most they'll maybe lose to 6 to 7. Obviously these characters are all very strong, but they tend to be a little closer together overall than the 5 up top. Nope, you don't know my name. Isn't that you, Stir? And right here is where you'll see most of the characters. Honestly, everyone here is probably the most closely packed together. The characters down here, they maybe lose I want to say 9 or 10 at most. They're overall pretty strong characters, and they just have decent spreads across the cast, but have obvious weaknesses that can be taken advantage of. Hey Cam, how's it going? Anyone in here? These characters, they're weird. They have very clear weaknesses, but they're all designed in a way that their main game plan will work on just about anybody. So they have very clear weaknesses. They have a lot of hard fights, but their core game plans are just overall very strong regardless. And down here, obviously the worst characters in the game. I think they lose at least 14 matchups, and well, they can still play the game, but honestly, you gotta go through a lot to succeed with them. But anyway, let's get started. First off, we have the obvious number one here, the giant green toad, Rash. So like even before Alex started beating the hell out of everybody with Rash, I've always said he was the best character in the game. His neutral is pretty much unmatched. He doesn't have to play by the rules of the game. He has one of the best instincts in the game. He doesn't have any losing matchups. People like to say he struggles on knockdown, which can be true, but it's not always the case. Like, once he gets meter, Shadow Boot is a great reversal. And even without meter, Rash has a deceptively good backdash, and his jab reaching so far allows him to get out of things he probably shouldn't. Plus having something like that as a combo starter, yeah, Rash is easily the best character in the game right now. He doesn't have to play by the rules of the game at all. A lot of characters can't really stop him from virtually doing whatever he wants to in the neutral. He has great pressure. Probably the single best button in the game with his stand hard kick and his jump hard kick for two at that matter. That's arguably the best air normal in the game. Has incredible mobility, like virtually no one can really zone him out except for maybe Kilgore, weirdly enough, in Arya. And he has the great capacity to play lame as hell if he wants to as well. Like if you ever see Alex play or even like Aphex more recently as well, like Rash is just perfectly content just controlling space. Plus, he has one of the best matchup spreads in the game with no losing matchups and what like 15 winning probably or so. I want to say just off the top of my head. A better Rash is his only weakness. Well, yeah, he does have some uncomfortable 5/5s like a good Hisako player or a good Agnos player, like a good Maya player. Those can all give Rash pretty good very heavy problems. Or like a good Orchid player or a good like Tusk player. So Rash definitely does have some characters that fight him better than others, but overall he doesn't lose to anyone. Hey Alvaro, what's up? But yeah, there's no need to be said more about him. If the game were ever to get another balance patch hypothetically, he's the one I'd look at the most. Anyway, moving on to number 2. For number 2, I put my own character Agnos next. The reasons for that is much like Rash, he also doesn't really have to follow the rules of the game though for different reasons. Mainly he just doesn't have to play the combo game at all, and he doesn't have to do that to devastating effect. That wouldn't be a problem by itself, but the thing is, versus almost everyone in the cast, Agnos has a huge command in the neutral game. So he's constantly keeping characters out or just bullying them while he's building meters so he can get those giant cash outs for a lot more often than he probably should. Omen fights Rash fine. He can. Omen can deal with him, but it's a pain in the ass. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, for the number of ways he can get his unbreakables, Aghanos builds his has his meter gain gets meter way too easily. It's between that, the command and neutral, as well as he really only has one direct counter in Riptor. That was why I put him as the second best character in the game. Like much like Rash, he doesn't have to play by the rules of the game for the most part. The character, and even without the unbreakable damage, the character's just normal combo damage is obscenely high. Like he's one of the five hardest hitting characters in the game just off of normal combos alone when he has two bars. BRIB getting the torches and pitchforks out for not Arya. I'll go into why I don't have Arya there when I go over her though. She's still gonna be in that yeah, she's still gonna be up there with those two. But yeah, just how much I've played this character and how much I've learned about him over the years and how just honestly unfair he is. He largely gets to ignore the rules of the game, but while he doesn't do what he wants to in neutral like Rash, but he overall just has a great command over it versus almost everyone except for like a select few characters. Luna's my student. She's not allowed to downplay. But anyway, yeah, that's why I have Agnos as number two. He only has one real hard counter. He has a great command in neutral everybody. He has excellent pressure. He's one of the best zoners in the game, surprisingly. And it's his unbreakable damage and the ways he's able to get it. Like off the top of my head alone, there's more than 10 ways he can go into an unbreakable combo, which doesn't make sense. Fulgor versus Agnos. I don't think it's bad, though Fulgor is still one of the best options versus him. Fulgor obviously still has a lot of good tools versus Aghanos, but it's not that easy for Fulgor to get started, and he can find himself in a lot of bad positions defensively versus Aghanos. So like if Fulgor gets going, he can definitely run him over, but it's not that easy to do. Like the more I played the matchup and just the more I looked at it, like through my past sets with Nikki and stuff. But anyway, moving on. Where is she? Oh yeah, there she is. Next up is Arya. So yeah, it was pretty obvious Arya was going to be somewhere up here. She has every tool in the game pretty much. Not only does she have every tool, she's not a jack of all trades. She's pretty much a master at all of them. The character can zone. She can play footsies. She can. She has some of the best pressure and mix-ups at the same time. She's able to pretty much dictate most matches right from the start. Like even just her flight body alone is something that a lot of characters will have a hard time dealing with. On top of that, Arya has damage she really shouldn't have. Like both in two of her bodies, both blade and a boost form, her damage is very high for how relatively easy it is for her to open you up. And while Arya doesn't quite break the rules of the game like Rash and Aghanos do, she bends the hell out of them. Like she skirts around them pretty hard. Like she's like right on the line of breaking them and not breaking them to me. However, despite all that, there is a volatile aspect to Arya's character, which is why I don't have her above Aghanos or Rash. One, she's made out of toilet paper, so she has all the tools in the world, but at the expense of just melting if she gets touched once. And if she loses a select body, it can really cripple her versus certain characters. Like if she loses base body and she finds herself fighting someone like say Omen, the neutral becomes much harder. If she's fighting Aghanos and loses blade body, then it becomes much harder to open him up. So there's like things like that to keep in mind with Arya as a character. She has all the tools in the game, and she's a master at everything in the game, but at the expense of just being extremely fragile. And if she takes too much damage, she just gets weaker as the fight goes on. All right. So number 4. At number 4, we put the character I hate the most in this game, mainly because of one main mechanic, which I'll go over, Fulgor. Overall, Fulgor is just a really, really solid character. Much like Arya, he's kind of a master of all trades as well. Like he's one of the game's best zoners, being able to cancel his fireballs to mix up their patterns all at once. Like he can shoot 3 fireballs, each with a different pattern. His heavy laser is one of the best zoning tools in the game because it's a full screen stagger, as well as his medium laser because it covers so much. It covers more ground than people realize, and it hits twice. So you'll find characters will end up running to that move a lot. But on top of that, Fulgor also has one of the best vortexes in the game, mainly because you can't see the asshole. Like he's able to pressure you while being completely invisible, and it's not just and it's a complete left right mix up that he has a great overhead and a strong low game as well. But that being said, Fulgor can struggle in the neutral versus a few more characters than people realize, honestly, and he does, in my opinion, have a few bad matchups. Like naturally, a lot of people do agree that he loses to Omen, but on top of that, I could see Fulgor having issues with Arya, Shadow Jago, as well as Eagle for different reasons. So and on top of that, it can be tough for Fulgor to actually get started versus certain characters. So due to how his meter works, his meter doesn't build traditionally. If he's if he's zoning or just being stuck in block stun or being damaged, then Fulgor's meter builds extremely slow, and he won't have access to certain things. His mobility won't be as great. His vortex won't be as strong. Things like that. So Fulgor is a very good character, but he has to get started, and that's not always the easiest case, and he does have a few bad matchups. All right, moving on to number 5. In the 5th spot, I actually have Tusk here. This was a one I teetered on a lot. Like I was choosing between him, Omen, and Hisako for the longest time, but in the end I decided to go with Tusk. The main reason is his weaknesses are not as easy to exploit as people might make out. Tusk has a very powerful neutral game. He's arguably possibly the hardest character to zone out in the game overall. Though he lacks to mix up some of the other characters in the top 5 have, he has some of the best frame data in the game overall. Like just about every one of his up close buttons are plus. Coupled with a strong throw and being the overall highest damaging character in the game, he doesn't really need heavy mix ups. The character has a great instinct. Like if Tusk confirms, he's probably gonna get a 70% cash out that you have to guess on, if not more, depending on how many resources he has. And another thing about him is I truly think he only loses to 3 characters. Like the more I've played him over the past 2 years, I've gotten a chance to play like every matchup at a relatively high level. I really think he only loses to 3 characters out of the whole game. So yeah, that's why I do have Tusk as a top five character. He's a relatively simple character overall, with honestly obscene damage at the time. He has an underrated neutral game, and he's a very difficult character to zone out. And he has possibly among the best frame data in the game overall. His buttons are all really good. Then not ignoring the deflect mechanic, that can really mess up a lot of characters if you're not careful. Like the way I describe Tusk is you don't the deflect is something you use you kind of make people forget about it honestly. You for she can control him. She can control him for sure, Chronicle, but Tusk can get around that. She can definitely control him, but not enough to beat him, in my opinion. The only characters that control him and beat him, in my opinion, are Aghanos, Fulgor, and General Rom. Tusk does have ways around Arya's neutral option as long as he's careful, and then due to how hard he freaking hits, it evens things out to me. Not anything, Kron. He can run right under her stand medium kick, and if he spaces his light skull splitter out, he can punish. He can use that to whiff punish her crouch medium kick. And Tusk only needs one opening to end one life bar on Arya, even without the meter. So like she can definitely control him, but she's always walking on eggshells doing so. Yeah, it is, but only if Tusk is being mindless with it. But anyway, moving on. On to the next tier. At number six. By the way, this whole thing is being ordered. I'm trying to order this whole thing for once, so it's not just going to be kind of jumbled. But at number six, I have Omen here. Overall, the best way I describe Omen is he's an extremely suffocating character. More or less SVM. But yeah, at number six, I definitely have Omen here. He's a very versatile character who is very suffocating versus a lot of characters. He's literally all over the place. He's a footsies monster. He has great mobility on both the air and ground. Like people don't realize Omen's walk speed is actually one of the best in the game, so he can be played grounded pretty well as well. He doesn't lose too many matchups, but he does have some weaknesses. He does have some weaknesses, mainly due to how his anti-airs can be a little lackluster, and a lot of characters can easily bully him on knockdown. Like Omen's wake up options aren't the best. The problem is actually getting him into that spot though, because Omen controls neutral so well. Where Stir creates to downplay Omen. I don't know. I think he's in here somewhere. But anyway, on the Omen. What was I saying? Oh yeah, a lot of characters can OS his wake up options a lot. Like it's not difficult to just bully Omen on knockdown for a lot of characters if they can get him into that position, which is often easier said than done because they have to get over his neutral game first. And on top of that, Omen he can do good damage if he like reserves his meter, but typically he won't. A lot of times he has to choose between the damage or using his meter for pressure or lockdown. And yes, he does get meter after every ender, but for certain characters, he finds himself having to burn it as often as he gets it. But despite those weaknesses, Omen maybe only loses to like 5 characters at most. And on top of that, he's just able to suffocate most characters. Like a lot of characters really just can't deal with his pressure or even his zoning, which is also pretty good. Just how he's able to just navigate the screen pretty much. Omen is a good character, although he can be a little weird to pick up at first. Definitely still among the strongest characters in the game, even if I don't quite think he's top 5 anymore, but still definitely among the strongest characters in the game. But anyway, next to the onto the next character. The next character we have the Fake. I'm sorry, Hisako. All right, I'm not gonna trash on it too much here. I feel like Omen is difficult to quantify, if only because of how volatile he can be sometimes. Yeah, that's definitely something about the character. He just has a weird nature overall. But anyway, on to Hisako. She's a lot of fighting games players' worst nightmare because she has all the strengths of a grappler, but pretty much none of the weaknesses of one. Hisako, she has both good and bad mobility at the same time. Like she has one of the best dashes in the game. She's able to get around pretty well because she has one of the best forward dashes in the game, and she also in her wall jump as well, which is a good mobility tool. She has very far-reaching normals, and she has just overall some of the nastiest offense in the game. Like if Hisako knocks you down, no matter who you are, it's time to guess. It's time to fucking guess, and it's time to pray. On top of that, she builds up damage. On top of that, she builds up her damage levels pretty fast. Like Hisako, after one opener, it's not easy. It's not difficult for her to get to a level 3 or level 4 combo right there. She has one of the fat. She has a her light influence is overall one of the fastest moves in the game. It's a 2 frame throw, so it allows her to disrespect a lot of typical plus frames. Like if you're +2, Hisako doesn't have to hold it, so you always have to watch that. On top of her parry as well, which is a 0 frame move. Undead, shut up before I figure out how to ban you. Anyway, despite her having among the most powerful offense in the game, she does have her share of weaknesses. One thing, just about everything in the neutral with Hisako is very committal. If you know how to take advantage of her dash, you take advantage of her dash. The fact that she has to use that to get in just about every time, you can make things pretty hard for her. If you know how to take advantage of that, as well as read when she's going to try and jump over something. Another weakness she has is she's weak to projectile-based lockdown, especially without meter. Like characters who have strong projectile-based lockdown, they'll always give the character a hard time. She can't parry. They can usually space her out where they're out of range of her throw, so Hisako is just stuck holding it pretty much. But if she's able to get over that, she can. If she's able to get in, she can pretty much run anybody over. Not me. I'm gonna get out. What's up? Hey, usually I do too, Kron. Like I'm good at fighting the character, even though I think she's a damn fake and a disgrace to grapplers everywhere. But moving on. So where is he? Oh yeah, here he is. At number 8, I actually put Idol here now. Idol overall is just a very good character. He's one of the most annoying characters to fight in neutral overall, just because most characters can't do a damn thing to him there. Like you're either getting zoned out due to how good his mage form is at keep away. All of his his normals and mage, they all have pretty great range, and then he's just able to control space with his meteors as well as the lightning bolts as well. Then, even if he's in warrior form, his light destroyer is just one of the best control options in the game. So you have to. So Idol is a character that really tests your patience without having many big weaknesses himself. Self. And he also has one of the strongest instincts in the game. Some people consider it the strongest. Like it just amplifies everything about the character. His damage becomes much higher. His pressure becomes even stronger, and he's just able to access the best things about both of his heads at once. However, he does have his share of weaknesses. Mainly in certain cases, if Idol does switch at the wrong time, it could end up making the matchup worse for him because he doesn't want to be in a certain body versus certain characters. Like he does not want to switch to versus Spinal per se. He doesn't want to switch to Mage at the wrong time, or he doesn't want to switch to Warrior at the wrong time versus somebody like Glacius because he'll just find himself being kept out. So that's just a volatile aspect about Idol's character that you have to keep in mind. And there are certain characters who just don't care about either form that he has at all. And a lot of stuff that Idol does can be beaten out by just simply waiting him out, since he doesn't possess strong mix-ups or he doesn't hit the hardest overall side of Instinct. So Idol is up here just because his neutral is just immaculate, but and he has solid pressure overall, but he doesn't hit too hard. He doesn't have amazing mix-ups, and overall he just doesn't if you wait him out, you can end up beating out a lot of his options. So yeah, just an overall pretty solid character. Moving on to number 9, Thunder. So if there's a character that scares the shit out of everybody more than even the top tiers, it's probably this guy. Just because if he touches you, you maybe only have a few seconds before it's game over. Thunder will mix your ass so many times in a short amount of time, and he does such great damage that you just don't know what happened. He's a hybrid grappler, so he has the threat of that command throw. His Shadow Call of the Earth is debatably the best command throw in the game because it reaches far, it's fast, and it leads to another juggle for him, which can potentially be a 50% cash out for him if he has enough resources. Offensively, Thunder is one of the strongest characters in the game. He has a solid neutral game overall too, but he can, despite what people say, he does still have some grappler weaknesses. Some characters are good at keeping Thunder out, and some characters even are also good at bullying him when he doesn't have meter, since Thunder doesn't have a real reversal without any meter, and then they nerfed his defensive options overall, so he's more prone to getting bullied. But much like Hisako, if Thunder gets in on you, you're in for a rough night, no matter who you are, whether your character beats him or not, which he does have his fair share of losing matchups. His Vortex just works on anybody if he does manage to get in. So if a Thunder player has the read, it's gonna be hell trying to beat him. On top of his instinct, which just amplifies everything about the character. Like even though his Crow Dash is technically punishable, he creates so many scramble situations that you're not gonna be able to react to what he's doing in time. But anyway, moving on to the 10th slot. Where is he? Okay, yeah. At number 10, I actually have Arbiter here now. The reason I have Arbiter up here is that I've realized he's a lot like Aghanos, where he has a just without the devastating wall crash effect, pretty much. He's really good at stopping other characters from playing the game, and he's a pain in the ass to deal with in neutral for a lot of characters. Plus, when he gets plus his overshield may be one of the best overall defensive mechanics in the game. Like when he's able to pop it safely, that is, just because if your character relies a lot on projectiles, then Arbiter just doesn't care about you. So that can up both his defense and his offense as well, because it allows him to straight up ignore certain options. Like if a move involves a projectile, even if it has a physical hit first, Arbiter will just ignore the projectile part of it overall. Forseti, he's a more recent player. Forseti is really good. He's a really good Thunder player. He came around more recently, but I've played him too. He's definitely a very good Thunder player. Honestly, I'd say he's better than Idamaster because he has a lot more patience. But yeah, on the Arbiter, he's just really good at stopping characters from playing the game overall. Between how good and far-reaching his normals are, his overshield as well as he sticks a grenade on you, you just have to hold that for in a lot of cases. And the character is straight up able to create lose-lose situations for you. That being said, Arbiter definitely does have his fair share of weaknesses. Mainly, his mobility is not great. He is a big character, so he is prone to those. He's a relatively large character as well, so he's prone to those mix-ups that big bodies are susceptible to. And like and he doesn't even though his overshield is a good option if he pops it safely, like if he cancels it into something, it's easy to punish on knockdown. So Arbiter doesn't always have the best defensive options. Suicide grenade is good, but like that's a limited resource, so he has to be careful with that as well. So Arbiter, if he's not careful, he can definitely find himself getting mauled pretty hard. And on to the 11th character. Just because how I formatted this, there is still going to be one more character in S minus. Just because I don't think he loses that many matchups either, but he just doesn't win as many as the other characters when I started looking at things. And the last character in the S tier or S minus, whatever, is Glacius. So Glacius is he's sort of like a zoner rushdown hybrid character. He's able to create an obstacle course that isn't easy for a lot of characters to get through. On top of this, he has a good up close game as well. RB whatever. Look, I don't have trouble fighting the character either, Kron. I'm not judging things based on that. In fact, I don't have trouble fighting any of these characters really outside Fulgor. Well, not even him really. But anyway, on the Glacius, he's able to create an obstacle course that makes a lot of people get a lot of characters have trouble getting through. But if you mess up trying to get to it, the character hits very hard. So he punishes you pretty hard for messing up trying to get through his obstacle course. On top of that, he has a pretty strong up close game as well. Glacius' mix-up game honestly hasn't talked about enough, especially when he's in the corner. He also has some of the most annoying neutral options in the game. Like if you don't know how, Cold Shoulder can be tricky for a lot of characters to punish. Especially if the Glacius player knows how to space it correctly. Glacius is a grappler, prove me wrong. Eh, he kind of is. I mean, the way I see it, Shatter is pretty much just a long-range command throw. But anyway, I've gone over his strengths. He creates the obstacle course. He hits pretty hard, and he has a good up close game. He also has a pretty good instinct as well, because it gives him armor, which is a pretty good defensive option. But it also ups his mobility, which is one of the few Glacius weaknesses Glacius does have normally. but he does have his share of weaknesses. Mainly, Glacius has trouble with getting counter zoned. Yeah, like Glacius has trouble with getting counter zoned, and he can have trouble on knockdown as well. Mainly because he his reversal is very easy to slow, so it's not difficult to get around at all. Like most characters, they can meet you with a light button or even a fast enough medium button and be safe from his DP. And even if he cancels in the shadow hail or anything, most characters can just use a shadow to gap right through that. So if Glacius does get knocked down or he finds a character with superior zoning abilities to his, like Conra or Aghanos, he's gonna find himself having a rough time. But that's enough for the S tier. Moving on, in the A tier, first character that goes there for me is Shadow Jago. The character is he's a jack of all trades overall. Like he's a great zoner. He has a solid rush down and mix up game. He's just overall solid at everything. Shadow Jago was a character that's kind of just in the middle because he doesn't lose to that many characters too hard. Maybe what would you say, Kron? Like seven or so, maybe Shadow Jago loses to 6 or 7. I don't know, something like that. The thing is, he doesn't really beat that many characters that hard either. And then, unlike some characters, his pressure isn't bad per se, but he needs meter to keep it up, and he does have to rely on some unsafe 50-50s at times. So like Shadow Jago, he's overall a solid, versatile character, but he doesn't quite excel at everything, which is the main thing, which is why I have him there. He's a good character that doesn't just struggle too hard against the cast, but he doesn't beat that many characters either. He's someone that a lot of new characters have trouble with just because his 50-50 game is completely unreactable and he is able to force a mix up at start, which is pretty strong. So he's definitely a good character, but just not really the one of the best overall or anything. There really isn't that much to say about him. A solid character with a very good 50-50 game, but you have to be careful playing that game. It can end up getting you messed up. And he's a resource dependent character as well. But anyway, the next character I have after that is Riptor. To me, I think Riptor, in just terms of just raw rushdown, I don't think Riptor has a rival in that area. The character forces you to block just everything, no matter what she does, plus, 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 and you're just stuck holding it. You have to take a risk on a reversal, which is risky because if she based that out, she hits hard as hell too, or backdash, which she can catch easily as well. The character the character isn't as easy to zone out as people make out either. Like that's not really a weakness Riptor has like that. The only character is only in a select few cases. The main thing about her is her main weakness is actually she's more prone to getting bullied than anything. She has a pretty fat hurt box due to how long she is. So Riptor is prone to getting bullied, and she has trouble with strong footsies characters as well. Characters who can out button her in the neutral pretty much. Like those are her two main weaknesses. But other than that, she, in my opinion, is just the best pure rushdown character in the game. She has great damage, has a solid amount of set play as well. And like I said earlier, she's just plus 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 plus. If Riptor knocks you down, you're just stuck holding it. But on to the next character. Next up, I actually put Mira here now. Mira is good, but she's an extremely volatile character. Just because she's the game's take on a glass cannon. Like, she maybe outside Tusk, she is the hardest hitting character in the game. Like in terms of just counterbreaker damage, she probably is the hardest because Tusk typically won't get that unless he lands with something else. Mira has great mobility as well. In your experience, only Arya and Glacius can really zone her. Fulgor kind of can too, like if he manages to get going. But yeah, and like Cinder can too, but like those are really the only ones. But anyway, on to Mira. Mira has the overall highest counter break damage in the game. She has great mobility, strong mix-ups, and she can be a decent zoner as well. And she has pretty good buttons. But all this comes at the expense of her own health bar. So she's an extremely volatile character because she's a volatile character and she's a difficult character to use because you constantly always have to be watching that, picking when to go for damage and mix-ups over trying to reserve some of her health is a big problem for Mira. And another big weakness of her is she has just pretty weak anti-airs. So despite being a good air fighter herself, she tends to have a hard time with other strong air fighters like Rash or Omen or just characters who are difficult to anti-air like Aghanos. But overall, Mira is a pretty strong character. Where I have Cinder will probably surprise a lot of people, honestly. But we'll get into that later. Now you gotta keep in mind, I'm basing part of this off matchups as well as how good think the character is. But yeah, Mira, she's a strong character, but you really have to be on it with her because if you're not on it, you'll find yourself draining your health too quickly, and then you're dead. Like a typical 30% combo or something can end up being 75% for Mira if you're not careful. Although she does have a powerful instinct, she also only finds herself only getting one per game, just due to how her health mechanic works. It's uncommon for Mira to actually get two instincts per match. But like if she gets going, her pressure is good, her mix-ups are great, and she is never out of a fight just because how high her damage is. Like her meterless counter break combos are like in the high 70s alone. So Mira can always turn things around if she manages to get that touch and she's managed her resources right. So let's see, who do I have next? Oh yeah, after Mira we have her sister. So yeah, her sister Maya is right after her to me. Maya is overall just a really solid character. She's kind of in a position like Shago where she doesn't really beat anybody, but she doesn't lose to anybody, and she doesn't lose to that many characters too hard either. Like overall, Maya's just a really good character. She has one of the most annoying neutral games in the game, just because contesting with her daggers can be a problem for a lot of people, and naturally being able to get a having a full screen homing unblockable, that's always going to get you a free opening versus almost everybody is a pain in the ass to deal with too. She has decent damage. She has solid buttons. She has pretty good pressure, and she has the capacity to keep characters out as well. If you like use her dagger game a certain way. But the problem with Maya is she has among the worst defensive options in the game as well. Like her shadow counter isn't great. Certain characters can bait it out to make it whiff. Her DPs, neither of them are great. Her, if you know how, you can straight out shut. You can even completely stuff her shadow DP out. So yeah, like Maya, she struggles pretty hard by from getting knocked down, but her neutral and offense are good enough to make up for it. And like I said, she's just a solid character overall. She doesn't beat that many characters, but she doesn't lose to many that many too hard either, which is why I have her right in the middle pretty much. But anyway, there's not much to say about her too much to be honest. After her, the last of the characters that I use, General Rom. So there's some misconceptions about how many characters the fight actually loses. Like the thing about Rom is he doesn't really lose a lot of fights. People think that if you're able to zone him, you automatically beat the character. That's not the case. There's characters that can run zoning games on him that lose to him. Like Jago and Eagle are the best examples of that. So he doesn't really lose to a lot of characters, and he wins against more characters than people realize as well. But the reason I have Rom high is because he has a great strength that's kind of wild in a game like KI, and that he doesn't have to worry about the combo game. Figure no, Maya does. No, Maya does have a hard time with Wolf, mainly because he gets around the daggers pretty easily. He out buttons her, and he can just like he just beats her ass pretty much. But yeah, General Rom. The reason I have him up here is because he has one great strength in that he's just largely able to ignore the combo game to a great degree, mainly due to how much his raw throws hurt as well as his krill mechanic. Like if he has the krill on you and he just lands two command throws in a row, that's already 50% right there. You've lost. And he has great one chance damage as well. Like Rom has maybe the best just overall one chance damage in the game, not even counting his instinct. Like a level 1 corner combo can end up doing 45% for him just if he has his krill stacked on. So like I said, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how many fights the character actually loses. Like to me, he only actually loses about 8 or so and he wins 10. So which is why I have him right around there. Not to say he doesn't have some fights that are hard as hell for sure. Like the fights with Conrad and Arya and such, they're definitely brutal matchups. But overall, he doesn't lose that many, and he just has one really good strength in a game like KI that he doesn't have to play the combo game. Hey King, how's it going? But yeah, there's not much to say about Rom. Plus, with his instinct, he's the game's hardcore grappler. He only needs one touch and a couple good guesses to turn things around, even in his more brutal matchups. Yeah, I do, King. You missed the explanation already, unfortunately. But after him, next we have Jago. Jago, he's still a solid jack of all trades character. The problem is he finds himself getting outshined in a lot of areas by other characters. So he's good at everything, but there are other characters that are just better at things that he are, and they don't care about the rest of his game, which is why he's a lot lower than he used to be. Overall, he's still pretty good. Like Jago still has good buttons. He has good damage. He has good pressure, and he still has one of the better instincts in the game due to the healing mechanic. So he's definitely still a solid character overall. He just finds himself getting outshined by a lot of other characters in other cases. Like typically the game's extreme zoners or the characters that like him out button him while still being able to ignore his fireball game. Those are the ones that give Jago a hard time. Yeah, there's not that much to say about him. He's just an overall solid character that finds himself getting outshined by a lot of other characters, and that's all. But can definitely still compete. And next character, one that'll probably surprise a few people, Orchid. So much like General Rom, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around the character. They mistake having very hard fights versus characters like Agnos and Gargus to having to losing a lot. Like yeah, some of Orchid's matchups are definitely brutal as hell, but that doesn't necessarily equate to losing a lot of them. Like I've heard people say she loses to characters like Omen or Eagle, which is just dumb. She definitely doesn't lose to either of them. I honestly argue she beats Eagle. Thing about it is Orchid's main weakness is she has a fairly linear neutral game and she can be prone to shadow counters if she's not careful, but she has among the most messed up offense in the game overall. Like Orchid is great at keeping you locked down. She's among the best footsie characters in the game as well, so characters that are forced to fight her on the ground are usually in for a very hard time. Like someone like Thunder per se, they just weep trying to fight Orchid on the ground. Yeah, I'll go into Cinder later. My opinion on him changed a lot when I looked at things. I used to have him higher too, but I'll go into that later. But yeah, to me, Orchid is a stronger character that people make out just because like when you look at how good her offense is, and she doesn't have as hard a time getting in as some people make out. Like yes, her options to get in can be risky, but the reward she gets for getting in greatly outweighs the risk. Like Orchid has some of the most messed up offense in the game. Like even before you've seen some of the stuff that Nate's been posting up lately, she's always had a very strong vortex. She hits hard as hell. So like yeah, it can be a struggle for Orchid to get in sometimes, but like when she does get in, she completely destroys you. And like her reward factor for getting in is higher than is the reward is greater than the risk for her most times. And like a lot of Orchid characters would probably be better with her if they just calm down. Like if you look at how Mac or Nate play her, they don't go full gorilla, and they're more successful for it. Anyway, the next character in this row, Conra. So he's another character I took a long look at on who he actually loses to and who he actually beats. Conra, he's a character whose core game plan, no matter who you are, it works. Like no one has fun dealing with the curses. It's true he definitely does get mauled. And setting up those curses versus certain characters can definitely be hell on earth. But if he manages to get his curse game started, everybody has to deal with that, and it's not fun for anyone. Khan, he's a character who requires a lot of lab work, and you have to know what you're doing because all of his tools have a very deliberate purpose. So he's one of the hardest characters in the game to play for sure, but that doesn't make him weak or anything. Like even talking with Duel recently, Khan maybe loses 10 matchups and he wins 10 or 11, so he's not among the worst characters in the game. The hardest for sure, but not among the worst. Like his overall game plan, the curses, nobody has fun dealing with that. His neutral is very annoying to deal with a lot of characters just because he's essentially the doll sim of the game. He has among the best set play in the game. Like I said, he requires a lot of lab work to figure out. But overall, Khan is a very messed up character, to be honest. He just finds himself getting mauled pretty hard in a lot of cases. In some cases, he does require absolute perfection. So yeah, he's someone I definitely have to look at it because a lot of people did rate Khan bottom five for a while, but when I looked at things before making this, I had to come to the realization he's not that bad. And closing off this row is gonna be Kim Woo. Kim, she's a case where she's a character with a lot of five fives pretty much. She loses a little more than like say Shadow Jago or Maya, but she doesn't lose that many overall. And she doesn't win that many either. She has a couple of key winning matchups, like in the couple of characters she fights really well, like say Arya, and like she beats Garga and things like that as well. But Kim overall, she's also one of the hardest hitting characters in the game. She has a good instinct and some underrated mix-ups as well, which not a lot of people are always aware of just because how uncommon she is. The main thing about Kim though is she's one of the hardest characters to optimize overall. Like much like Khan, she's a pretty difficult character to play. Her matchup spread isn't as good as some of the other characters either. Like it's not terrible, but it's just not amazing either. So Kim is pretty much just at the end of the mid tiers for me. Like she's a good character with some sneaky mix-ups and has amazing damage, especially when she has meter and everything. Like her Shadow Dragon Kick is just the single highest damaging ender in the game probably. But she's a solid character overall. Good pressure, solid buttons, but she can have trouble being zoned against certain characters, and unfortunately, she is on the bad end of the worst matchup in the game versus Aghanos. So yeah, she's a decent character, but overall, she's just really hard to optimize overall. So on to the next row anyway. First character on this row is gonna be Kilgore, and truthfully, he's one of the only characters I can see changing in this in the future. Like all the other characters I'm pretty much set on, but I'm still not 100% sure on his matchup spread. But there's a lot of fights I do see him losing. And overall, Kilgore is a character who requires great precision and a lot of perfection because he's typically not great at playing from a life deficit at all. So a lot of cases he finds himself having to zone characters out perfectly or trying to rely on those big one chance cash outs, which are great, but he doesn't always have the best methods of opening people up. So Kilgore can struggle in a lot of areas. Like naturally, he's the game's dedicated zoner, so he's good at that. He can be annoying to get in on if you're not careful, but like, long as you realize your character's best options at getting in on him, typically fighting him isn't too difficult. Like I said, that's not to say Kilgore is bad by any means. Like I said, his instinct is one of the best in the game because, like he gets the best aspects of his zoning, and he gets those ridiculous one chance cash outs. The problem is he doesn't always have the best methods of opening people up outside of a basic strike throw game, and he's just not overall naturally. Kilgore just isn't a good up close fighter either. Like and one thing I've noticed about it, his DP is not that great. Like I found when I see characters fighting Kilgore, a lot of people just figured out ways to just stuff it out completely. Not to say he has bad defensive options, but like because he has a spot dash, he has one of the best back dashes in the game as well, and he still does have a true DP. But like I've just seen a lot of ways that people can get around it pretty much. But anyway, enough from Kilgore. Next up, Shin Hisako. Without a doubt, I think this character has the most messed up offense in the game, bar none. It's just very hard for her to get in a lot of times. But when she does get in, just pray. Like, you won't know what's going on. She's the only character that can legitimately safe jump any 3-frame reversal. Just a lot of left right stuff. She can make anything she does safe if you place her orbs right, pretty much. The, huh. Looks like I just got a follow from somebody. Who was that? I have to figure out how to check that later. Oh, I'm sorry, man. I don't know how to say your name, but thanks for the subscription. ATACEHEAC. This is pretty much always where I had Jago Alvaro. That's pretty much always where I had him ever since he got toned down earlier in season 3. But yeah, anyway, back to Shin. Like, her offense is among the most messed up in the game, but she really struggles hard versus the game's extreme zoners or characters who can just control space against her pretty well. So like, getting in for her can be extremely difficult, but the payoff for her is great. Like I said, I think she has the single most messed up offense in the game. Probably even more so than I know, because like, I dread to see what Nate will find with that character if he keeps playing her. So yeah, great offense, but she struggles pretty hard getting in. And she does have a decent runaway game herself, which can make things a problem for certain characters, particularly someone like General Rom or like Thunder. And then, she's one of the best ground fighters in the game as well. Like, not many characters can really beat her if they're forced to play footsies with her or anything like that. So I know my next picks are definitely going to be probably be a little controversial for sure, but I don't care. Y'all can argue with me if y'all want. Next up is Gargus. So, make no mistake, he's probably still easily the most annoying character in the game for sure. He's not fun to fight by any means. And his core game plan, much like Conrad, it still works on anybody if he does manage to get it out. Just because with 2 minions on the screen, Gargus just in like it's a 3-on-1 match. That's not going to be easy for anyone to deal with. But the thing about Gargus is he he probably has the worst defensive options in the game overall. The character is prone to getting mauled by a lot of characters. Getting started for him versus a lot of characters is a lot harder than people realize. Like, don't get me wrong, he's still a candidate for the most annoying character in the game overall, but that doesn't equate to him being that good of a character. Like, overall, Gargus does have solid options. Yeah, Rom versus Shin used to be a legit 9-1 SBM, like, because there was a bug with her orb that she could abuse or something. I could talk about it later. But yeah, back to Gargus. Like, he does have a solid toolkit overall. He's a good zoner. Naturally, his air mobility is good as well, and he has a good grappler mix as well. But the problem is, it's hard for him to keep any one of these single aspects up for a long time at once. So he has to switch between all of them all the time. So yeah, he constantly has to switch between all of those all the time. And like I said, Gargus has among the worst defensive options in the game, so he's prone to getting mauled. And there's a lot of characters who can just flat out take advantage of that weakness. And they're also pretty good at bypassing his overall neutral game as well as even his minions, for that matter. But anyway, on from Gargus. The next one on the list is top one Eagle by people who stopped playing the game, and at least, but yeah, to me, Eagle, even before Base and Dayton started playing him and saying so, I never thought he was a great character. Like, he has a very annoying vortex, don't get me wrong, and he's a pretty good zoner as well. Like, he has one of the most annoying 50-50 games in the well. In the He has one of the most annoying 50-50 mix-ups in the game, but a lot of people simply never labbed how to really get out of it. Like, once you realize how, you realize it's not that difficult dealing with Eagles offense. And this comes and I played literally every strong Eagle player in the matchup throughout the game's history in multiple different matchups. Like, if you once you realize how to block his mix-ups, Eagle isn't that great of a character. Like, he's probably the lowest damaging character in the game overall. So even if despite his mix-up game, he has to open you up 55 times to kill you, pretty much. And the character just gets dunked on by a lot of characters who either A, just don't care about his mix-up game that much, or just be able to run him over before he's able to even get it started. Coupled with his weak defensive options, as well as his low damage and the worst instinct in the game, bar none. Eagle, despite how annoying he can be and how good his mix-ups can be, isn't that great a character overall. But that's enough about him. So next we have Cinder. He's a character who punishes you for not spending a bar to get out, taking or get out of take to get out or taking a risk. Yeah, pretty much. And like once you lab your character's options, you just pretty much figure out how to deal with it. Which to say isn't is easy for some characters to do than others, but it's still like you just gotta people just never really bothered to try and figure it out. But yeah, next up is Cinder. Now he's someone I used to have a lot higher, but as I looked at him, I realized that Cinder does have a hard time against a lot of characters. Like, this isn't to say his toolkit definitely isn't a pain in the ass. Like, I always tell everybody about Cinder or anyone who's interested in playing him, like, he's a pain in the ass by design. Everything he does is designed to make it harder for you to play the game. Like, he sticks bombs on you, which hinder your mobility, and he stops you from using your best tools if he opens you up because of the burnout mechanic. And he's constantly flying all over the place. So he's definitely an annoying character with a pretty good kit. But when I looked at Cinder, when I talked to other Cinder, when I talked to good Cinder players, I realized he struggles a lot harder than I initially realized. Mainly because Cinder is such a weak ground fighter. That's the main thing. Like KI has a lot of really strong ground fighters, so that's something that's just a huge weakness that can really be exploited when it comes to Cinder, especially when he's fighting characters like Jago, Orchid, TJ, even Agnos and such, or like Rash. Like Cinder does struggle against a lot more characters than I initially thought, and he does have struggles, and he can struggle with a lot of characters hard zoning as well. So like don't so like Cinder definitely has one of the most annoying kits in the game, but he struggles a lot more than I realized initially. Mainly just because how weak of a ground fighter he is, and how susceptible he can be to being zoned out pretty hard. So like if he gets going, he's really good because he's one of those characters where his overall game plan can work on anybody just because he's able to stop you from using your best tools. But like when you look at his matchup spread, it's really not that great. He doesn't beat a lot of characters, and he loses like 12 or 13 in my opinion. But that's that. And here we have the four worst characters in the game in my opinion. and he gets outclassed him in the air a fair amount as well. Yeah, that's true, honestly too. But anyway, at the top of the bottom tier is TJ Combo. So this is pretty much high. TJ as a character is pretty much risk, high reward by definition. He has a lot of difficult to read options. The problem is almost every one of them is unsafe, and he'll end up getting punished if he's wrong on them. He doesn't have great defense, and he finds himself, and he's pretty weak to pressure as well. And he can find himself. It's difficult for TJ to play footsies with a lot of stronger ground fighters as well. So TJ, you really need a wild streak to be successful with this character. You need to make a lot of hard reads, and if you do make those reads, the payout is pretty good because he does great damage, and TJ does have a lot of tricky offense. And he also has one of the best instincts in the game because it nullifies a lot of his weaknesses. It just buffs, and like it just buffs his overall offense overall. But like TJ does have some strengths in that he's a difficult character to zone out as well. So characters who rely on zoning, TJ typically does fight pretty well. The problem is versus almost everybody else, he's stuck making a lot of hard reads to get out of pressure, and if he's wrong on those reads, he just gets punished hard almost every time, pretty much. And even on his offense, he still requires a lot of hard reads because it's relying on things like resetting people with tremor or like going for shoot toss, and those both get punished pretty hard if he's wrong. So TJ is just a very very high risk high reward character. Key emphasis on both. If you're right, you get rewarded pretty heavily. If you're wrong, you get dunked on hard as hell. After him, I have Spinal, and this is on my opinion alone. Spinal, I know people accuse Spinal players of downplaying, but I don't really think they do. Spinal as a character, he lives and dies by his vortex pretty much. Like if he gets started, yeah, it's not easy to deal with just because he does great damage and he has a lot of plus frames and solid mix-ups overall. The problem is getting started with Spinal can prove to be very difficult for a number of reasons. Mainly, his neutral isn't that great. His buttons aren't bad, but they just get outclassed by a lot of characters. He's another character who's pretty easy to mess up on defense as well, just because if he doesn't have meter without shadow counters or anything, his teleport is pretty easy to OS by a lot of characters. And although he's one of the hardest characters in the game to zone, that doesn't really play in versus a lot of other characters. Say for examples like Eagle or Conra. So if Spinal gets going, much like TJ, he can run you over. The problem is it's very difficult for him to start running somebody over before they run him over. That's not to say he can't fight, because his offense is still top notch and his damage is really good. So if he does get going, he can always turn things around. But you really just have to be on it with this character. Your defense has to be on it. You have to understand your other character's neutral options since they're probably going to be better than yours. So you have to know how to get around them. And up next is Sadira. So the main thing that keeps this character from being the worst to me is strictly her instinct and the fact that her neutral can still be annoying to navigate around for certain people at least. But overall, Sadira isn't that great. She's a solid ground fighter, but she does find herself getting outclassed in that area. In season 3 in particular, there were just a lot of characters that were introduced with really strong anti-air options that just kind of nullify her game overall, and or that just do what she does but better, like characters that got buffed that do what she does but better now, like Omen. So in a lot of cases, it's hard for Sadira to get in, but her instinct is such a huge X factor that it almost makes up for everything, almost. Just because of how good the mix up she gets for that 15 seconds is. But she still needs to get the hit to make that effective. So if your character if you just run from her while she's in instinct, you end up wasting the whole thing. That's not to say she can't compete. Like anyone can still compete in this game for sure. But like Sadira finds herself struggling a lot, and she's a character who's heavily reliant on how good her instinct is overall. She doesn't much like Omen. She can do damage if she holds on to all her resources, but she'll often find herself using those for something else, so she won't always get the great damage. And last, talk about A Fall from Grace, the character who was one of the strongest in the first two seasons. To me, is now the worst character in the game. Saberwolf. First off, I'll say this: Roman, I'll applaud with how you've been managing to optimize the character lately, because it's truly a that's not easy to do with this character at all. But the main reason I have Wolf as the worst character in the game is his offense is very simple. It's so simple that it can work on anybody. But he has a very hard time in both in neutral and on defense versus a lot of characters. Mainly because his neutral is so linear that he'll find himself just getting outclassed by a lot of characters. And his defensive options aren't great either. Like he has a true reversal with his when he has meter, but it's fairly easy to safe jumper bait out. So Wolf as a character, he just finds himself either losing neutral or getting mauled, or both, to be honest. Which to me effectively makes him the worst matchup spread in the game. Like he still has a few key fights that he wins, but he struggles against literally every single one of the top tiers beats him. Almost everyone in the top 10 beats him as well, pretty much. Actually, looking at this, I think every character in the top 10 does beat Saberwolf. He just has a hard time overall fighting a lot of the game's strongest characters, and even then some. It's mainly just due to his weaknesses both in neutral as well as on defense. But yeah, this is overall what I think of the cast overall. Luckily, YouTube just uploads these things instantly, so I'll just be able to go right into that. And that's what my tier list looks like. Make sure I save this and download. I'll probably upload that once I'm done streaming. Alright, that's that. I'll probably put that on Twitter once I'm done streaming. And thankfully, YouTube uploads the videos right as I'm done, so that'll make things easier too, so people can look at this later. Arbiter doesn't beat him. Okay, yeah, I could definitely see Arbiter not beat Arbiter having a harder time with him for sure. Yeah. But anyway, I'll talk about next. Since a potential new game seems to be a hot button thing right now, I'll talk about that for a bit. When it comes to the concept of a new game, first things first, whoever ends up making it, I don't want them to try and copy 2013. Like, yeah, you can maybe use it as a blueprint, take inspiration from it, but overall, I hope whoever, if somebody does get KI and they just try to do their own thing, because honestly, talking to Keeps and the rest of the Iron Galaxy team, if they even said if they were to make a sequel to KI, it wouldn't resemble this one that much at all. So like take that as well. Like I'd rather a new developer, sure, take the aspects of what make KI 2013 so good, but like try to do your own thing with it. Don't just try to like make too much of a copy of this game. And naturally try to hopefully get a better lobby system, break the curse that no fighter can have everything, good presentation, good online, good lobbies, and excellent gameplay. And as far as mechanics wise, like I've heard the topic of them having breakers cost resources. I'm fine for changing the breaker system overall. Like, Cupcake suggested a thing where it's like if you break too many times in rapid succession, then it starts affecting how you gain instinct. That's what Cupcake suggested. Like, in fact, it affects how fast you gain it if you start breaking too many times in rapid succession. And I wouldn't mind that because overall, honestly, I don't think breakers should give instinct now as a thing. So it won't lose. So what he suggested, you won't lose it overall, but if you start breaking in rapid succession like too many times back to back to back, if you're just mashing and locking out constantly, then it starts affecting how fast it gains, which is a decent penalty to force people to start playing. Which is a decent penalty to force people to play a little smarter with things sometimes. Potential new game has been a hot topic for the past 3 years. Not gonna lie. Well, yeah, but this time the rumors behind it are actually credible since the guy who leaked it does have a pretty good track record. So that's why people are more talking about it a little more now. So maybe something will actually come out of this guy since the guy who posted it, he doesn't post things without like without a source. Like he even asked people if he could start posting DMs to like show where he got it from. It's the dumbest thing you ever heard. Eh, I don't think so. Like I said, I wouldn't be against it. Breakers are inherently limited already. Like I said, it's not something I'd be against it. I'm just not. If they do change it, I just hope it's not like MKX style or anything. Like if it's limited, if you only get a certain number of times to break, then it runs into the same problems that MKX had. Yeah, the problem is finding the threshold is very difficult. Like that's what I agree with. Like if someone can adjust it without making it, if someone can adjust it without, yeah, if someone can somehow adjust it well enough without sacrificing the game's creativity, which is what I'm worried about. Like this game with the game with how wild this game's offense is and with how creative it is, a breaker system has to exist pretty much. If a new game comes out, then they try to force a limited breaker system, they'll have to sacrifice the game's creativity overall. It varies by who you talk to. It's true. Like personally, I don't hate the current breaker system at all. I do see people's issues with it, even if I don't have a problem with it myself. Now, if it changed in some way, as long as it wasn't like as long as they didn't try and like you only get three breakers that recharge later or something, I'd be fine with that. Like if they try and tone it down another way, then sure. Thing is, you're never gonna 100% satisfy somebody with a mechanic like that. But it has to exist, otherwise the game has to sacrifice the creativity. You can't have offense as ridiculous the game in here is. And one thing Keith said was, this is one suggestion Keith actually had, just make counter breaking more reliable, honestly, or make it so you don't get such ridiculous. Or if they were guessing and you counter broke and they just guess, but they still just lock out and you still just don't let them get a max damage punish. That was something Keith suggested, I think. Yeah, that's my thing. I don't want the game's creativity to be sacrificed over anything else. Like if anything, if a new game comes out, I want them to expand on it. Like if a new game comes, one mechanic I want more than anything is give more ways to expand your meter, like sort of how Shadow Jago has with his surge meter, or like how Spinal can use his meter to summon resources. I want to see things more like that, and if a new game ever did come, like give more ways to expand your meter overall. Like naturally, things would have to be balanced a certain way. Creating better post combo breaker states. That's definitely the hardest thing to figure out because before it favored strong rushdown characters too much. Now season 3 has a lot more extreme zoners and the breaker system favors them more. But yeah, that's just one main mechanic I'd like to see. Like give more ways to expand meter. Yeah, you can at least. Yeah, the worst feeling I ever had in this game was when I was playing Storm at NEC. I went to counter break him, and Storm even admitted he was trying to break, but instead of him breaking, he ends up popping Instinct. Instead of getting broken, he pretty much ends up popping Instinct, like right there, and I get punished and lose for it. Yeah, like global EX, yeah, like character specific meter options would be dope. Like, or if they can even use meter, or if they can even use meter to enhance certain moves. Like, say if Agnos were to come back in the game, maybe he can use his meter to like enhance his walls so they're a little harder to break. I'd be fine with that if the unbreakable damage didn't come back at least. Like that's something I'd be cool with if he came back and they decided to adjust him or give him something like that. If the unbreakable damage didn't come back at least, just because I think that would be a little too much. But yeah. So yeah, like if a new game comes, I just want to see them honestly just look at what made this game great, but try to do their own thing. Make sure the netcode and lobbies are good. Make sure the presentation is still good and everything as well, and just keep the game as creative as you possibly can. Just expand on the creativity overall. Like, you know, this game created some of the most unique characters to ever exist in a fighter. Like, sure, I rag on Hisako a lot. I rag on Hisako a lot as a joke, but she's one of the best fighting game characters ever created. Like from a visual standpoint, especially. Then like Agnos, he's my favorite character in the genre of all time. Like even what they did with some of the classic characters, like what they did with Tusk, they took a character I didn't like at all, and I love the character now. Yeah, you missed the whole thing, Delta. Unfortunately, I'm talking about what I like in a new game overall, pretty much now. But anyway, I don't really have much else to say. Like, I wasn't going to spend too much time talking about that just because it's been talked about enough already on Twitter.